What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Steve Orlando. Welcome to the show.
What's up, man?
Not much. I am excited to talk about you. You have worked on comic books with Wonder Woman, Batman, Justice League, Project Patron, Search for You, like so many stinking books. Like you are one busy creator.
I get around, yeah, for sure. But it's in that variety that we keep everything interesting. At least that's what I tell myself. We try to never do the same thing twice.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, I always like to, whenever I bring on a guest, I just love to know, how did you get into comics? Like reading comics, collecting comics? Where did that love start for you?
Well, I was into comics before we even had a comic store in my town. I'm from Central New York, and my father's a sports memorabilia dealer. And so I would be going to the flea markets to buy, when he would be going to buy shit or sell shit and things like that. But the secret is I hate most sports, or now. And when I was 2 and 3, I had no opinion whatsoever. So I would always get comics out of like the back issue bins or things, back when they cost a hay penny or whatever in the 80s. So my first books were like wildly out of order, and they were just whatever people had. They happened to be West Coast Avengers, I remember.
Oh, nice.
And then that sort of continued because we didn't have a solid store until the mid 90s. But I would always pick up non-sports cards when I was at shows with my father, because I just, for better or worse, baseball was not my thing. And that's what he was selling. So I got into first back issues from Marvel, and then it was collecting non-sports cards like DC Cosmic Teams.
Oh, nice.
Like that. I mean, Marvel Masterworks, all those things from the 90s. Marvel Masterpieces, I think, is what it was actually called. Masterworks is the graphic novel collection series.
Okay.
And I just sort of like, I kind of knew, I knew all these characters before I really knew their stories, right? Because I would just have the trading card and whatever's in the back of the bio.
Have all the facts.
If there even was one, because some didn't even have them. So it's why I was always obsessed with Manga Con, even though nobody cares about him. That's why he ended up in Milk Wars. But so I collected all those. I still have them at my parents' home somewhere. And then we finally got a Walden Books with a spinner rack, and that's when I got into like Web of Spider-Man and stuff like that. And then soon after, like Grant Morrison and Howard's Justice League, and I was sort of all in by then. And then soon, we went from like having no real store in my town to having like 4 in the overall city of Syracuse real fast. So at that point, there was no turning back. Plus, I could read them. Plus, we had silence to stay in reading in middle school, and they let me read comics, and I was just like, "Yeah, this is great."
Right? We had the Pizza Hut book club growing up, and they counted comics for me, so I was like, "This is great." We got free pizzas and reading comics. So, where did that transition then for you as a comic fan though go from? Okay, now I want to start to create comics myself.
Well, it changed over. I was drawing a lot of the characters again because I learned them mostly from trading cards. So it was like, oh, like I don't really know who Dr. Fate is, but he looks cool, right? So I mean, and Dr. Fate does look cool, by the way.
He does.
He'll never not look cool. That helmet is boss. So I was drawing them, but then as I started to read like the bullpen bulletins and things like that, in addition to articles in the newspaper, because back around when I got in deep is when Superman, became electric blue and was never changing back. So I was like, oh, I got to get on board. But around that time, there were a lot of interviews about how they came up with the new powers, the new suit, and everything about his world that was going to change, and what would stay the same as well. And that was my first sort of look into the creative process. And that's when I realized it would probably be the writing side that interested me the most. Like I don't draw in a way that people would pay for, but I could probably still do it. And I did write an illustrated letter, the whole thing, a 100-page book in college as part of my thesis. But doing that is what showed me that, at least for me, the joy comes from the writing side. There are people for whom I'm sure that the individual storytelling on a page and things is really what sparks joy for them. But when I was drawing this 100-page book, like, by the time I was on page 30, my mind was already on the next idea because I'd already written it. And I was like, shit, I have to do 70 more pages of this. I mean, and I did because I wanted to graduate, but like that sort of locked in for me where I wanted to end up professionally if I could. I mean, I was a wine salesman for 10 years before comics, so there's also a chance that it would never happen.
Yeah, that's always cool. I always love to hear just people's origin stories and how they get into comics, and I find it fascinating. And when I reached out to you a while ago to try and set up something, it was because I had just finished one of your series, Project Patron, and I adored that series.
Oh, thank you.
So I have to, before we get, because there's so much stuff we got to talk about, but before we get into anything else, I got to just talk to you about that a little bit. Book from Aftershock. Love the series. Where did that idea, because I felt like it was such a cool, unique idea, where did that come from and kind of spark for you?
There are two major influences for that were like classic Silver Age Superman stories, and then more sort of provocative, the provocative side of mech anime. Because I was watching Evangelion when I would go to the gym, and that's also where I would do most of my thinking anyway, because I would be on the treadmill and I couldn't be bothered by my phone or anything unless I wanted to trip and die. So I was intrigued by how really, I mean, there's a lot going on in Evangelion. Obviously, it's one of the greatest animes ever, but like there is a heavy focus on the psychology of the pilots, and that really sparked interest in me. And at the same time, I was like, how can we make this comics? Because I am in my heart, especially a Silver Age comics guy. And I thought of the Superman robots, and so I was like, oh, we can combine these things, and not only sort of do a wag the dog style story, but also once I realized that we were going to have a Superman robot, I was like, oh, well, how would we get to that? And I realized we could homage the death of Superman, which obviously was a big cultural moment when I was younger. So 3 major influences, I guess, but it all came from the surge to mash up Kurt Swan's Superman with more I don't want to say headaches, that's a douchebag phrase, but thought-provoking sort of mech animes and mangas.
That's a great concept, and I believe the trade's coming out soon, right?
It should definitely be out soon, probably by the end of the year.
Okay. So if someone for whatever reason didn't read it, what was your like elevator pitch for that book?
Oh, I mean, it was real simple. It was, what if the death of Superman was a work? 30 years ago, the Patron falls in battle against this primordial creature who's definitely not Doomsday, definitely a different character. and much like in the meta story we're commenting on, like soon after the Patron rose again, but in this world it wasn't really him. In this world, he did really die, and he was replaced with this duplicate, a Reploid. And this is the book that chronicles the lives of the pilots that get in the rig and pilot this extremely advanced synthetic being, that rewards the world's hope, that at least started out as a way to give people their faith rewarded and not see their hero fall. But the stresses are immense because our bodies aren't meant to be superhuman. And so much like Thunder Agents, if you want to go to another influence, like every time these people pilot the Patron, every mission takes a year off their lifespan. So there's a huge sacrifice, and it's even more tragic because by virtue of this being one of the greatest secrets in the world, nobody knows these pilots are even making the sacrifice. And that sort of intense tension and push and pull of duty and emotion is where we kick off our story.
Yeah. And gang, if you're watching this and you haven't read that series yet, it's 5 issues. Like I said, I believe the trade's coming out soon. Go pick it up because it's great. And they're definitely you feel like you're setting up that there could be more to the story.
We would love to come back either for a follow-up book or even just a follow-up one shot to oversized, that a lot of that depends on how similar things do in the market. We are a slave to the market just like anyone else, but we would love to come back, obviously. And if not, it's the biggest cliffhanger ending since The Sopranos, but still more satisfying.
So gang, you have to go and support that trade because I want more. So make it happen. So that was kind of seemed like more of a creator own. You dabble in writing for a lot of intellectual properties that have already with Wonder Woman and Batman characters and things like that. What is your process when you are like having to write on a Wonder Woman book or something to kind of go about writing for someone that people have written for years and years and years?
I mean, the process is actually exactly the same, or I should say the goal is the same, like whether it's an original or whether it's existing IP. Our job is to understand the core of who these characters are and then challenge it in interesting ways. So in some ways, it's easier on originals because obviously, you're making it up from scratch. So whatever you say is the core of these characters is the core. But that said, sometimes the blank page can be very intimidating. So it's can be looked at that in some ways it's easier to know where that answer is for someone like Wonder Woman or Batman or Superman, because we have 80 years of stories to draw on. And while the answer might change a little bit depending on creator to creator, we know very well what coloring outside the lines is, and so you kind of know who Diana is, who Superman is, who Batman is, and things like that. And then the challenge there is, because there's 80 years of stories, how do you challenge that in a new way? How do you confront who they are in a new way? So in some ways that process is shorter for those characters because we know broadly.
Right.
But we might have to hone down our own specific take. But on a book like Project Patron, or a book like, I mean, take your pick of anything that I've done, a book like Commanders in Crisis, or I mean, even a book like Rainbow Bridge, like we're building these core armatures of characters from scratch. And so it can almost be a lot more intimidating because, you can do anything, but you can also do anything. And that can work out in a lot of different ways, enough rope to trip yourself up with, and sometimes. So this is why it's still good to have peers that are like, no, you've gone a little, you need to, okay, come on. But yeah, so even a book like Grimlock, it's a relatively simple barbarian adventure story, but it still challenges his core ideals of what strength is and what power is and things like that. So that's our job, no matter what it is, because we're here to, we're here to show you why these characters are great. But to do that, like, they have to overcome, they have to succeed. And so you really have to know who they are in their very soul. And then, you can play with that. You can push it, you can pull it, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, and I think you even see that. Haven't even mentioned it. I feel like your Martian Manhunter series that the mini series, like, you were able to, I felt like you were able to stretch a little bit and explore more so than, other avenues of that before, which I thought was just super engaging.
I mean, that's my favorite thing I've ever done at DC, and one of easily my top 3 things I've ever done. So I'm glad to hear it. It was one of my last things I did at DC, but also what a way to go out, because it is one of the books I'm most proud of. So hopefully, I think that's out of print now, so people should track it down and let them know that they would like to read it, because I would love for it to still be out there.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And yeah, and Riley's art just paired so well with the writing on that. So
someday we'll reunite. I got to figure it out still, but it's gonna happen.
Awesome. Well, a couple weeks ago, you had some pretty big news that you released on your Instagram and Twitter of that you were taking over for Marauders.
I am. Yeah. Thank God Jerry got a promotion, right? Or where would I be? No, I'm super excited. I've been a fan of, well, again, like most people, I mean, who doesn't on some level enjoy X-Men, but especially in my case, like, I mean, it's another one of those things where I met them before comics, because I was playing the console game that was, that I would still, like, on my bucket list of things I want for my house to be a working version of that console game.
Yep.
And Dazzler, big shocker, was my character. Look at me. But regardless, like, I already liked them, and I rented that VHS of Pride of the X-Men. I was like, I was so obsessed with that one episode, and I was a kid and didn't know that there wouldn't be more, that when the 92 show came out, I thought it followed on the Pride of the X-Men failed pilot, to the extent that I didn't know why the hell Rogue was I didn't know why Dazzler was suddenly from the South and could fly. Because when you're like 7, you're like, oh, like a hot chick in a jacket. Surely they're the same character. I had a lot of questions about Rogue at the time.
We all.
but regardless, it followed me. And then, my mentors in comics were, when I met them, they were on X-Men, Joe Kelly and Steve Siegel. Never let them see me say that. And they were on X-Men and Uncanny at the time. So it felt serendipitous that I've now finally come around and joined the office, especially in a moment of creative renaissance like they're having right now under Hickman and now under Jerry, and this whole room that has grown out of what Jonathan built, that he's nurtured and sort of had both the paternal instinct to make sure we could tell the stories that we wanted to tell, but also the contentment and self-security to let us grow out in our own ways, which is really, really unique. So to be part of that is super exciting. Marauders under Jerry was a great book, and I mean, he's crushing on an X-Men. Characters that you might have seen that are not in the new Marauder roster, I promise you, do have roster placements for the most part. I'm not going to spoil them, but mine is not the only book to be announced, so I would just say keep an eye out. Because I know people are like, oh, where are these people going? But roster churn is a part of X-Men books. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of characters that we all love. So everyone you like is going to show up somewhere, to my knowledge, and what I'm doing is going to be, I've been shocked at the swings they're willing to let me take. So I really can't wait for people to see it. And no one's guessed the 8th member yet, and it's pretty cataclysmic. So I can't wait for the first issue to come out. There's hints of it in the annual, but when Marauders 1 hits, all will be revealed.
So the first book is slated as the annual, and that's in the beginning of the new year, correct? And then after the annual, you'll go on with the ongoing.
That is correct. Yeah. So the annual will sort of show broadly the recruitment of the new team. You will see where everyone is ending up when Jerry wraps, which is probably in December, logically. But the annual will both introduce a new threat in Brimstone Love. The thing about coming into the X-Men office right now is that half of our villains are now on the Quiet Council, so we have to generate new ones. And I am a huge 2099 fan, so it remains to be seen. I don't like to negate other people's work, so I guess there's a world where we could rationalize that this is the one from 2099. But I will say that. And we are approaching this as sort of the main 616 version of Brimstone Love. Not like that the other one was an alternate reality, but of course we're close enough to 2099 now that there's no reason that he couldn't be alive. He had to get born and pop up somewhere. So is this the present version of the person we saw in the future? I like to leave that stuff all wide open. Because there's no reason to say he isn't. It's an alternate future, but eventually people who exist in alternate futures get born because time keeps going on. So it seemed like a very obvious pull to me, not just because he looks like a badass, amazing design by David Baldeon, but the name is also for me like pure magic. And yeah, I wanted someone who had a strong viewpoint to counterpoint Krakoa and Xavier, and also someone who could just throw down with the whole team, and that's very exciting to me. His point of view is, as I said, certainly unique, but he's going to put them through the ringer, and then you'll see how he continues to play in the book going forward.
Yeah. That's so exciting to hear. X-Men is such a vast universe, and like you said, all the characters just seem to go. There's so many different X titles out there that there's a lot of different playgrounds for them to play in. And so it's always interesting. I know always whenever a Marauders book gets announced, it always is people are like, well, who's on the new team and those elements and things like that. So I know people are excited for that annual to start to see that. So
I've been loving it. Daken basically just is me. Akihiro is me in many ways. Like, I've killed less people than him, but like an angry bisexual person working through his feelings of self. Very similar. I don't, who would have thought? But I've also really loved his relationship with Aurora, and she's been super, super fun to write as well. And she's going to get, the idea of mutant circuits that the folks in the office came up with has been really fun. She combines her powers with tempo in issue 1 for a very fun effect that you guys will see. But I'm excited to get out there. I'm excited to challenge these characters, and you know, we are taking basically when the book started, it was like, oh, this is going to be Hellfire Training and Mutant Rescue. And, you know, creative, you know, teams go where the creators are interested in. And there was a lot of focus on Hellfire. And you'll see how Hellfire wraps up, but we are leaning into the rescue side of it. I mean, this
Okay.
is an action rescue book. Of course, the first rescue, you know, takes the heroes into space and with a mystery 2 billion years old, but it is still nominally a rescue.
That's so cool. I know so many people, myself included, are so excited just to see where this goes. How is that with the process of when you're writing a team book or trying to get a team book together, of dealing with other creators who are like, well, we want to use this character? Like, is there like a process that you have to kind of go through of like, hey, I want to bring this person on a team, or like kind of avenues that you have to go through to figure out who's going to be on in your book?
I mean, there are, of course, but the good news is that the X-Men office is easily the most collaborative I've ever been in. So, I mean, you know, we meet every 2 weeks and we all talk about what we're doing. And a lot of the conflicts that you might imagine are headed off, not even at the pass, like before the pass, because we're all in such constant contact. And it is unlike any other office I've been in, but it is really good. You know, we, if I want to know what's going on, or if there's if you know if a beat is being replicated, we can just throw that to the office and or we can talk to each other directly and figure it out in real time. You know,
Yeah.
like it is the reason everything tends to line up so well is because we really are in each other's shit, but in a positive way, a way that I think is leading to some of the best the X-Men have been in a long time.
That's
And the mutants, I shouldn't just say the X-Men because there's many of X characters, but you know.
yeah, that's that's so exciting. So we've talked about a lot of your different books that you're working on. I hesitate to ask you if you're working on anything else besides X-Men stuff, but I know you have a series out still right now. What else are you working on, or that you can talk about?
What else is going on? Well, there are two unannounced originals that are going to be out probably next year at minimum.
Okay.
There's a collab that is probably finally going to be out next year that I've been working on for the past 3 years with a friend of mine who is pretty well known. So you'll know that when you see it. That's going to be out with TKO, but I can't say more about it.
Okay.
And there's one Marvel book that will eventually give us a little gift back in Marauders that is going to be out next year that I'm already deep in, that I'm super, super pumped for, but that has not been announced yet. So that's going to hit probably in the late spring of 2022. So I'm in it, but it hasn't been, you know, we're not doing the
Okay.
press for it yet. And that goes without saying, by the way, that Darkhold is in process, and the Omega issue has such amazing art by Kian Tormey. And there's some surprises there too. Like I've been super, super happy to write Wanda and Doctor Doom. And you know, Wanda has been someone who is I think too often a pawn, and Darkhold, she her agency is laid bare and is strongly on display, is what I'll say. So the Omega
Okay.
issue, a very good issue for her. For people who want Wanda just to be taking names, she'll be taking them all.
Yes. That's great. Real quick before we wrap up, I want to finish up with your work on Marauders here. The annual, is the creative team for the annual the same as then going to be the ongoing series? And is it an ongoing series, or is it a, you know, limited maxi mini?
It's as ongoing as anything is these days. So
Right.
we hope to. I know that if we had our way, we just pitched the next 3 years. So for folks that think that there's not a plan, trust me, there is a plan, and it's and the plan is, and to quote the Joker, the plan is insane. You know, but I hope it all gets through because it's wild. Kreese is not going to be the main artist, and the only reason I can't say who is because they said I can't say who is yet. But
Okay.
we do have one for, you know, I try to always talk about the whole creative team.
Yeah.
So as soon as I can, I will. But I will say Kreese, I'm incredibly happy to have him with me on the annual, and I hope he can come back. But he will be heading off to someone else with issue 1
Okay.
as the main series artist.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I know, because I know people are always excited to, you know, just kind of like you said, know the creative team and who else is involved. And, you know, I always like to show support to that as well when I bring on the creator.
Let me tell you, issue 1 is in progress, and the work she's doing is, I mean, from the designs to the incredible energy and the layouts, like it is going to be a wild ride. And the cool thing is that like for a good reason, because Pepe Larraz and RB Silva are both amazing. There has become sort of like a Hoxpox house style. And I would not say that we're falling into that. And in many ways, that's even more exciting to me. And that is not meant to denigrate that style. I would gut Jerry like a fish to have Pepe draw my book. That's why he never comes to Boston. But we are forging our own path, and I'm super excited for it. It's high energy. And that's not even to say all the wild like concepts, both classic and new, that we're going to be featuring from all eras. You know, we've got stuff from Claremont, we've got evolutions of things from Morrison, you know, and I'm sure if I went back, I mean, listen, we also have bizarre Star Trek illusions that only me and 2 other people will get. So there's Easter eggs galore, but at the heart of it is something that is going to be truly, truly foundational for Krakoa and you know, the status quo of mutants going forward. As you'll see, there's huge swaths of history that they're letting me play with. And, you know, I was like, you know, me, like, look, but they're knock on wood, it's all coming together. And it'll be like, if all goes to plan, this will be a foundational book in the way that like Knights of the Old Republic was for Star Wars. And that's not to say that there's going to be lightsabers, but of course, but you see how there was lore upon lore that has stuck with us. And that's what I'm hoping we can do here. That is still hooked on like Kate Pride, someone who will not take no for an answer and will do anything to save someone. That's honestly like, I mean, she's based off my good friend Jose Andres. Not literally, I'm writing her based off him. She obviously has been around for a long time, but I've done disaster relief with him, and he is like a force of nature. You know, and he answers only to himself. And that's how I see Kate. No one is going to tell her she can't save someone. And that's going to take the team to some really wild places.
Well, we are excited to, as fans, to see where those places, where you take us and things like that. So, well, Steve, I know you are a busy person because I've literally listed off like hundreds of books that you've created. So I don't want to keep you very long, but if people want to follow you to know these announcements and things and everything that you're working, what's the best way for them to stay up to date with everything that you're creating?
My public socials are Instagram and Twitter, so you can follow me at either one. They're both the Steve Orlando, because Steve Orlando is a very patient video game designer that has been forwarding emails that are meant for me for the past 10 years. So we love you, Steve, if you're out there. We met at New York Comic Con one year. We touched fingers. It was like the fucking Wonder Twins, but the shitty Wonder Twins. But yeah, so the Steve Orlando on Twitter and Instagram. And you know, if you want a little more comics, go to Twitter. If you want a little more wrestling commentary and me being, you know, somewhat thirst trappy, as my peers have said, you can go to Instagram. But you'll get both with both, to be fair.
That's, I mean, let's be honest, comics, and then you also said wrestling and thirst trap. Like, well, why would you not want to follow both? Like,
well, you know what? Like, I don't work for the E, so I can just dunk on them all day. Like the people that work there can't. So I feel like I'm doing a public service, being like, this is terrible. You know, when it's terrible, and sometimes it's great, but sometimes it's real bad.
And someone needs to be able to say that, and you can, and we're grateful.
Gotta keep them honest, man. Everybody needs a memento mori. Especially you, Jerry. Watch your back. I'm coming for Pepe. I'm kidding. I would never do that. He's a sweet man.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for just taking some time to talk about comics. Gang, all the links are in the description of this video below. And as always, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.